make it clear. Order. Well, I did not make the comment.
Well, it's not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on my revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers, he is a life member of the Devonport Militia, speech writer, metro writer, tweeter and militant cyclist, David Slack. And he is the Associate Professor of the School of Communication Studies at AUT, Media Oracle, Dr. Wayne Hope. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, National Party Cabinet Reshuffle, rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, or the boldest political move of the 21st century. Issue 2, first political poll of 2013, National up and Labour down. What does David Shearer need to do? And Issue 3, tonight, Ratana this weekend, has Māori political influence peaked? What is happening in the Māori Party? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off tonight with Issue 1. If you read the mainstream media pundits this week, you would have the impression that the reshuffle of the cabinet was the boldest, most surprising, most brave and politically courageous move since the end of the apartheid regime in South Africa. The New Zealand Herald was breathless in its praise of John Key dumping two inept ministers, but how will any of this impact on the 270,000 children in poverty, the 7.3% unemployment rate, or the highest inequality rates ever recorded in New Zealand's history? David, the mainstream media were easily impressed, were you?
It struck me as more toothless than ruthless. I thought they were, John Armstrong in particular, was especially generous in categorising it as bold as he did. You know, is a mild-mannered, middle-aged lawyer from Christchurch going to go rogue on you if you demote her from cabinet? Is Phil Heatley not already familiar with the experience? You know, this was not a tough call, really. And
Kate Wilkinson was always on the way out, wasn't she?
well, I thought so. And look, the overriding impression I got of this was that the management approach all the way along here has been what they used when they were in business. They come into office and they run it in the same way they ran senior management.
Sure.
You keep promoting your biddable middle managers, and as long as they dutifully do your bidding, they're safe with you. And a candidate like, for example, Nikki Kaye is a perfect example of that. You know, she's a tremendously hard worker, but I could not, by any stretch of the imagination, categorise her as a visionary or an inspired thinker.
Sure.
But of course, she's excellent for the kind of work you want in your cabinet, of having people simply applying the formula. Now, this is not what you want in a cabinet. What you want in a cabinet is people who contend, people who come in with other ideas, so that you've got a contest of ideas and an evolution of good thinking, so that at the end of it you come up with the very best you can. Because Christ, we've got 3 or 4 accumulated decades of decline that has to be reversed, and in any large sense of that idea, we're doing nothing about it.
Do you think having Stephen Joyce rush in to handle the Novopay situation tells us that there are some major flaws with that bloody billing process?
Yeah, well, I hadn't realised that until now. I mean,
why has it taken 5 months and suddenly you have to get Stephen Joyce in there to wave his magic wand?
Well, that's a better question, because you know it should have become clear if much more readily to them that once a system like that isn't working, there's a pretty good chance that the system is fundamentally flawed, and trying to panic fix it is not going to get you any good result at all. I think the best thing they can do, and Joyce, I noticed, was carefully getting himself off the hook before he even got into the saddle, to mix my metaphors, was saying, I'm not sure that we can necessarily stick with these guys, and I suspect that's where you're going to end up, because when you've got a software project like this that's gone so fundamentally wrong, you actually have to ditch it and start again. And presuming the previous system they had is not consigned to the dustbin, that would be the one that you revive because it was working.
Would we get any of our money back if we decided we couldn't go with these guys
Oh,
anymore?
you can sue them. And you
Right.
can spend a lot of time in court, and given the colossal cock-up this constitutes, I would say your chances would be reasonably good.
Wayne, why is Heke Parata still Minister of Education? John Key claims it's because she is one of National's best communicators. Can that possibly be true?
No, there's a very good reason why she's still there. Education is the front line for those people who are really gunning for this government. The PPTA, parents of children in primary schools, primary school teachers themselves, primary school principals, all of those groups within the education sector are really mobilised against this government quite strongly. So any attempt to shift sideways or downgrade or get rid of Parata would actually look like a full-scale back down by the government.
Right.
And they're not going to do that because they know that those education groups are putting them under the most pressure. I mean, look at those PPTA ads in the papers over the last 3 weeks. I mean, that's heavy-hitting stuff.
So they've invested too much treasure in fighting the education and making the education reforms, you think?
Well, you know, every cabinet these days has what's called, you know, communications management. It would just look bad. It would look as though they were caving in.
Right.
They
not only
hate to
from the
lose. They hate to lose.
And not
They
only
hate to
from
be
the point
seen
of
to
view of
lose.
some voters, but from the point of view of the government itself, they would perceive that they were caving in. So they're not going to budge, but they also know that the minister's not been performing well. And basically, I think the Novotel thing is just a Trojan horse for Joyce to keep an eye on the portfolio.
Is it a little on the nose that the date for the people being able to send in submissions for the charter schools closes in January, when there isn't really anyone sort of around looking at education? They've only had it open for a month over Christmas, submissions for or against charter schools. A little on the nose, they've had a very short window for this?
Well, if there was more time for submissions, public opinion might move more against it.
Right, so they want to keep it as short as possible?
Imagine if you extended out the submissions and then the PPTA within that ads, then the government could find that they're dealing with a giant firestorm, to use a recent metaphor.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're committed to charter schools for ideological reasons, but they certainly don't want any public fury over it.
David, Nick Smith is one of the few intellectual heavyweights that National has, and his talents are desperately needed as a minister drafting legislation right now. But does he deserve to be back after helping his friend when he was the minister at ACC?
Well, I think the crucial point about that is that when he's under stress, he's not good.
Right.
More ethically, I mean. And that's quite a shortcoming in a minister, and that's something to worry about.
Yeah.
My other misgiving about putting him back in is that he's put into housing with the promise he's been making that he's going to apply his considerable thinking to solving the problem. In fact, I think what you're doing, from what I've heard him say so far, all he's going to do is say what they've been saying so far about its housing, but say it louder.
Right, we can't do anything, it's the
that's
council's
right.
fault for not opening up more land.
Exactly, that's right. This magic bullet idea that if you could but open up the supply of land, everything would be fixed.
Yeah.
And it's nonsense.
Which
And-
would work if you want Hamilton to be the southern part of the Auckland, Auckland City, right?
Well, if you love motorways as much as these guys do,
right,
yes, you
right,
would.
it
but-
wouldn't be a problem,
yeah.
right?
Well, that's precisely the point, in fact. Motorway development and real estate development as a solution to the Auckland housing crisis is only going to benefit those who bankroll the National Party.
Right. Wayne, how is this new cabinet going to tackle the multiple social problems New Zealand's got right now?
Well, I don't think they can tackle it because they don't have a vision or an objective which unifies the government. They just seem to be putting out fires. That was the case over the last year or two. I haven't heard anything from the government yet suggesting what their new momentum is going to be. It just looks as though they're just going to take pot shots at the opposition. And my view is that as we get closer to the next election, it'll be negative campaigning against the Greens
Right,
and the
right.
lack of decisive leadership from the Labour Party. in order to say, well, you know, we may be muddling through, but imagine if you elected the other lot.
Sure.
So I think the government will take that line rather than try and develop any.
Real attack politics this year?
Yeah. Building up to the election. They won't,
Right.
they won't shoot all their bullets this year, but that's what they'll be building up to.
But Wayne's right. I mean, all of this is reflexive. They're saying, oh, we took a hit on housing because Labor came up with a good idea. What do? Oh, we'll sack the minister and put somebody else in there.
Yeah.
We're taking a hit on Novapay. Oh, what do? We'll put Stephen Joyce in to fix it. None of this is forward-looking.
Right.
It's all reactive.
Final question to both of you: which minister is most likely to be dumped before the election? Who would you pick in the death cartel there?
Yeah, Nick Smith's always good for doing
You think Nick
because,
might
like
stir it
I
up?
said, you know, at a certain point under stress, he does tend to wig out,
Yeah.
and that does potentially give you some problem. Hekia Parata, I doubt, will be Minister of Education by the end of this term.
Yep.
They'll find some convenient way to move her along, I think.
Minister, who would you say is who's
Well,
gonna get,
actually, remember I said a rock and a hard place. They have to stay with Parata because of all the pressure building up on the government. They don't want to be seen to back down. On the other hand, she's not that good, is she?
No.
So, so it's going to be a battle between competence and PR, and maybe incompetence will win out.
Or a fresh problem, you know, so much that people forget about how bad she was, so now he can quietly move her along.
Right. Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2. The first political poll of 2013 is out, with National climbing to 46% and Labour slipping to 31.5%. Pundits were quick to claim last year that Labour's late surge was because of Shearer's butch routine with Cunliffe, which was odd because seeing as Labour had just promised the children of the middle classes 100,000 new affordable homes, you would have expected a surge. So who does Shearer have to sack now to go back up in the polls? Wayne, according to the mainstream pundits, Shearer went up late last year because he demoted Cunliffe. So should Shearer shoot Cunliffe in the face? Is that the way he's going to get poll traction?
Well, hang on. Now let's be fair here. This is the first poll of the year.
Yeah.
I looked it up. The poll was taken between January the 2nd and 18th. How many people would have been home?
Yep.
I'm sure the response rate wasn't terribly great.
Yep.
Less than 2,000 in the poll.
Yep.
So a bit early to say. However, if you look at the numbers for each of the parties, the Nats are 46%, which
Yep.
is a little bit up. Labor 31.5%. That's
Yep.
a little bit down. The Greens still at 12.5. I mean, I can say this for certainty. David Shearer won't want those numbers to stay the same
Yep.
over the next 2 or 3 or 4 polls.
Yep.
But to be fair to the guy, this poll by itself doesn't tell us a lot.
David, National gained a staggering 47% on election night. They are polling 46% after an abysmal year of cock-ups. No matter what smart-ass comments urban liberals like myself have to say on the matter, New Zealanders love their Gangnam-style dancing former money-trading Prime Minister, don't they? They love him.
Well, a decent chunk do, that's clear.
They do.
And part of the problem we maybe have is a conceptual one where this horse race thing is still presented as Labor is this and National is this and Greens is this, when in fact the point is, and we keep talking about this, but it remains true, the bloc is what matters, and the bloc is actually even Stevens.
Yeah.
It is.
And it's more likely than not that the bloc will take Labor and Greens into power with or possibly without Winston Peters.
Sure.
And National will be behind. So it is an interesting question. Why is that core support so strong when they've been demonstrably lamentable?
Yes.
But you know, I can't explain to you why so many people watch Coronation Street when that happened. So, you know,
Wayne, Greens were up to 12%. Can they seriously expect a 15% by the end of this year? How could the Greens get to 15%?
Well, traditionally, the Roy Morgan poll always does have them a little higher than the other polls. But really, they're higher in the midterm than they've ever been in the past.
Yeah.
So they're on a good run at the moment. And I think the reason for that is that they've done their homework on policy. And Mariana and Maritere and Russell really know their stuff. And they're out with comments and analyses of particular issues, whether they're environmental issues, whether it's to do with the housing bubble in Auckland, whether it's to do with the water supply in Canterbury. They're out there much faster out of the blocks in the Labor Party, and over time, that's going to build up. such that they seem to have more policy credibility
Yeah.
than the party that's supposedly bigger than them.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because they're very focused on solutions. There's a problem, that you get the government's discussion on it, and then there's the Green response, which is automatically solution-based. Well, here's the solution to this, and here's how we get the outcome. Why are their communications so much better and so much faster than Labor's?
Well, there's three reasons. One, they are good at communications. Their command of technology is excellent. Their websites are good. Secondly, they've got people of high intellect in the top positions, especially Russell, whose command of economics is better than any other politician in the House. And thirdly, they have a clear philosophy. And now, if you look at their manifesto, the philosophy is that they're in favour of what we would call a Green New Deal or green neo-Keynesian type policies. So each individual policy connects up with everyone else. We need more investment in the economy to create jobs, but that investment has to go into clean new energies and away from fossil fuels. Right?
Yeah.
Okay? So that explains their environmental stances as well as their economic stances. So everything joins up. So they're coming from a coherent position, and over time, all of those pluses that I've described to you are going to have a drip effect on the polls, and I think they have already.
Oh, David, when do we start seeing these polls as self-fulfilling prophecies? I mean, last election, 800,000 enrolled. Remember, these people were enrolled. It's not they didn't give a damn. They were enrolled. They just couldn't bother voting on the day because they had been told for 3 years, National's almost 50% in the polls, they're going to win. When do they start becoming self-fulfilling?
It depends a little bit on what I was talking about a moment ago, how it's reported, whether it's as individual scores or as the performance of the bloc. And it has been interesting that for much of the commentary in the last few months, they have recognised the importance of the bloc and said that actually, because they think, that means the government might be out. So they present it that way because they always like a story that posits the possibility of blood on the floor and change.
Yeah.
To give you maybe a more cogent response to that question you asked before about why do these people in the middle vote that way, I think it is to do with exactly what Wayne was talking about, that you have a clear philosophy for the Greens which tends to appeal to people left of centre. That the centre ground is always harder to go for and more kind of indistinct and
apolitical.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And Key's great at appealing to apolitical people.
Yes,
Yeah.
You know one of his favourite sayings, don't you? I'm comfortable with that.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people who don't want to get worried about things, they
Love
feel,
it.
They feel reassured by the Prime Minister. I mean,
So-
whatever you say about him, he's very, very shrewd at picking out the apolitical middle voter.
That's right, and that all feeds into the question you were asking. Where does when does the self-fulfilling prophecy come about? It has a lot to do with what that middle ground perceives the course of history to be.
Right.
And if they keep hearing about this bloc, and if they get the idea that this won't be a tail and a dog in the old MMP sense, but actually a coalition of Labor and Greens, and could actually be something very productive and constructive, and might create jobs and might get you houses.
Yep.
That could turn. I think that could solidify what's at this point more amorphous than real.
Do you think by 2014 that voters will be over listening to John Key tell them what government can't do, and they're going to want to hear about what government can do for them? Do you think there's a change as their own financial situations get a little bit tighter and a little bit tougher because of the recession?
Yeah, well, I think over time more people are going to become more apprehensive about the future, because for as long as we don't transform our economy, there are going to be a greater number of people living a more precarious existence. And so over time that anxiety's got to feed into that, I think.
Remarkable that 400,000 is an affordable house these days, isn't it? Final question to both of you on this. Predictions, where will National be poll-wise by the end of the year, Labor and the Greens? Give me some numbers.
Oh, I think these numbers that we've already got will be around about where they are.
Really? You don't see a hell of a lot of movement by the end of the year?
Not a hell of a lot of movement, no. Nat's around 46%, New Zealand First 5, Labor 31.5, Greens 12.5. I think that sets a kind of a template.
Right.
And the reason I say that is I can't see the present leader of the Labor Party actually driving down National's numbers.
Right.
I don't know what you think, David, but
give me some numbers. What do you
I
think by the end of the
I
year?
think they hit a home run with the housing policy, and if they
Yes.
can do that 2 or 3 times this year, that can take them somewhere. And I think
what's happened since then? anything much.
Oh yeah, but we've been on holiday.
Yeah.
You know,
But I think, anyway.
You know, if you can string a few of those together, then you've got an actual proposition that says, look, these guys have a whole lot of constructive ideas, and this is actually going to turn into something meaningful.
Yeah.
So that, you know, what got Labor back in '99 was a combination of looking competent and calm and ready to go, but also a pledge card that said, we'll do these specific things, and
Yeah.
people latched onto them and said, oh yeah.
Well, now
I like
there's a
that one on that
point. Labor's own policy seems to be very slow in development. I mean, I know the next election's a little way away.
Yeah.
If we're going to go for a pledge card approach, well, what have they pledged?
Oh, I'm not saying necessarily that's what you'll get, but the
'Cause,
the clearer they are, you know, the clearer it is that there is anything in particular is on offer, the better the chance they've got, is all I'm saying.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, Ratana is this weekend, and all political parties gather to flirt with Māori political aspiration. This year, it is overshadowed by a Māori party and leadership meltdown, with Tu Iraroa Flavel launching a failed leadership challenge against Peter Sharples, while Tariana exit all on from the sidelines. If that wasn't fun enough, enter left Honai Harawira and his offer to take over the Māori party with a hybrid Mana Māori party. His only terms are that he is leader and that they all walk away from the National Party. David, very kind offer there from Hone. But even if the Māori Party replaced Peter with Flavel, has the political brand of the party been too damaged by its relationship with National for them to succeed in 2014?
I think the fundamental problem is not so much the effect of their marriage with National as the fact that the reason they came into being in the first place has more or less disappeared. And that was, you had an issue that spanned Māori on any point in the political spectrum, conservative or liberal, left or right, because they didn't like the foreshore and seabed legislation, and that something had to happen, and the key government promised it would, and it did.
Yeah.
And so now you've got an identity crisis, because now you've got a party that is doesn't have a unifying issue, and has people who are span the spectrum from right to left, although the most left of them have gone off to Pono's party, of course. But nonetheless, you know, what are they for exactly? Now, Tariana would say whānau ora, for example, I guess, and that's a fair enough argument, but I'm not sure that that has galvanised the constituency sufficiently.
Wayne, by siding with National, those Māori seats are more politically important than ever, aren't they? National has no mates beyond ACT and United Future, and Labour can't win back the Treasury seats without the Māori electorates. So why aren't Māori gaining more from this newfound influence by being able to play both sides?
Well, because as of now, the Māori Party itself is in crisis. It's in crisis for two main reasons. The first reason is that they've lost touch with the flax roots, as they put it, and that's why Hone was able to successfully defend his own seat, which is quite a remarkable accomplishment when you think about it.
Against a strong candidate.
And instead of the flax roots, the leadership of the Māori Party has been listening more to the iwi leaders group and so on, which is the critique that Annette Sykes put out, especially at the Jesson lecture a few years ago, and that critique is pretty well grounded. So that's the first problem. The second problem is because they've sidled up with National, they've lost that image of being a stroppy independent party, having any kind of independence in relation to other parties.
Right.
And that's a real problem for them.
Yeah.
Where is the Māori Party going to be on privatisation? Have they really put out a clear view on that?
Yeah.
As a party?
Yeah.
Do they have any responses to the intractable unemployment problem? And how do they deal with the, linking back to unemployment again, how do they deal with the class divide in New Zealand?
Yeah.
Not just within the country as a whole, but within their own constituency.
Sure.
Right. So those are all the contradictions and difficulties they have to deal with, and that's why things aren't cashing out for Māori as they may have looked as though they would have a few years ago.
Prediction for the Māori Party leadership: who's going to stay, who's going to go? They've obviously had a failed leadership challenge because it doesn't seem like Flavel understood what the rules were. If they can make a change a couple of months down the track, would he go for the leadership then?
Look, I can't answer that question because the more I looked into this, the more I could see that it wasn't just a leadership problem, it was a constitutional problem.
Right.
Because my reading of it is that Flavel and his supporters would prefer to have a single leadership
That's right,
model, not
that's
a
right,
co-leadership
that's right.
model. Well, they'd have to change the constitution to do that, and that puts the very nature of the party into question. So, look, I mean, I look into my crystal ball and I see as a fog. I'm sorry.
David?
Well, actually, this is diverting a little bit. It has been. I have been wondering for some time, just when we get a coalition with Labor and the Greens, that co-leadership of which you speak, Wayne, is equally an issue with the Greens, and it'll be interesting to see how any coalition accommodates that.
But the point I would make here, though, is that co-leadership within the Greens is built into their very culture. Right from day one is the values party that was there. Whereas clearly in the Murray party you've got some older guys who think they should be running it, and then you've got another tradition that says no, there should be co-leadership. So there's actually a fundamental split within the party as to the structure of the leadership. And in the Greens there isn't that split. And
I think what was really crucial in the party coming together was the mana Peter Sharples has and Tariana, and you take them away and you've got real difficulties. Whoever goes, whatever you do, I think there's something of the Winston Peters factor there.
Should National be a little bit concerned? These guys are the only players on the board who are likely to be there after the next election as a possible candidate to be their support party. Should John Key be concerned?
Well, as Wayne rightly said, he's relaxed, comfortable about everything. I think I've been comfortable in Mali.
I'm comfortable about that. Yeah.
Let's wrap the show with last word. David, your last word this week is?
Well, I thought I might stick up for good old Gareth Morgan.
Yes.
I was going to bring in my beloved Kokako. I forgot to put it on the bike on my way in, but I'm, as I've said before on this program, I love our native bird. I love the sound of the bird, the dawn chorus. I love all of that, and if we could make that bigger and bolder by diminishing our cat population, I think that would be quite a thing. But it took me back all the way back to 1975 when Labor wanted to take the cats out of the dairies. There is a point of view that says that fed into them losing the election almost as much as a Muldoon superannuation right. If you want to really piss people off, tell them you're going to take their cat off them.
Absolutely. Wayne, your final word this week?
We all know who Kim.com is, don't we? It's raised a lot of issues, the new mega site. One issue I'd like to concentrate on. Did we notice that money or advertising money was pulled from all those media works?
Wasn't it incredible? Wasn't that incredible?
Yeah, and the inside info seems to be that it was the music and the film companies basically telling the likes of 1ZB where to get off if you run those .com ads. Well, I've got the following set of questions. Is that how a free market operates? Does censorship just come from the state, or does it come from bully boy corporations? And these paragons of pro-business sentiment like Leighton Smith and Mr. Hoskins, do they have anything to say about this?
Yeah, it is a fascinating case, isn't it? And no one said anything about it.
Excellent
no
questions.
Said anything about it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, David. Ladies and gentlemen, my final word. Last week, there was glitter all over my house. The place had been tidied and redecorated, my wine selection mocked. Thanks to Garth McVicker's astounding claim that gay marriage would lift the crime rate, I now know that I was robbed by the gays. Who would have thunk that Queer Eye for the Straight Guy was really a crime ring for gay burglars? If gay marriage increases child abuse, domestic violence and the prison population in the manner in which McVicker insinuates, what the hell has straight marriage been doing for the last 20 centuries? In the tiny little world, according to Garth McVicker, if those gays get the right to marry, they'll be leaving burning rainbows on people's front lawns. Gay marriage is not dangerous to New Zealand society. Garth McVicker's and the Sensible Sentencing Trust is. It should be a national source of cringeworthy shame that McVickers has the sort of political and media clout that he does. No other group has done more to degrade the dialogue about crime and punishment than McVicker and his Sensible Sentencing Trust. They have injected anger, fear and hysteria into the debate so that our social policy has been warped by hate. Our staggeringly high incarceration rates have McVicker and his ability to manipulate victim grief to thank for. That and a political spectrum who seem hell-bent on rewarding private prison profit margins rather than responsible guardianship of justice. In 2013, let's have way less Garth McVickers and way more gay marriage. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on